Good morning and welcome. If you have been with us before just once or several times, or you attend regularly or actually watch us on YouTube regularly, welcome again this morning. And if you are tuning in for the first time, a very special welcome to you too. My name is Myra Aaronson, and I am one of the team of worship associates who work with our interim minister, the Reverend Susan Suchocki Brown, our Director of Lifespan Ministries, Kirsten Hunter, our Director of Music, Joanne Connolly, and the rest of the staff to craft worship services for you each week. Reverend Susan is generally here to welcome you, but her husband broke his ankle this week, and she is right now, while we are recording this, at the orthopedist with him, so she could not be with us. But she will be here. You will hear a sermon from her and all the other components of the service that she usually leads. We also are in for a very special treat today because our Time for All Ages story will be told by some of the children of South Church. And that is always really meaningful and quite a bit of fun. And our video producer who will put all these components today is Jen Layton. And I'd like to note that our theme for this month is story. Now, Joanne, can you tell us about today's music?
Yes, thank you, Myra. Good morning, everyone. Always great to be here with you. And the weather is just getting so gorgeous. It just makes me happy. The theme, as Myra mentioned, is story. And Reverend Susan will be talking about how we frame our own stories during this pandemic. Is it a sci-fi adventure? Is it historical fiction? It'll be interesting to hear about. And so, picking the hymns, we're going to sing Just as Long as I Have Breath. I must answer yes to life, to truth, and to love. I just thought that connected with our stories. We'll also be singing When Our Heart is in a Holy Place. And I love this line. When our heart is in a holy place, when we hear our voices in each other's words. I love that. And Susan Adams has chosen some beautiful instrumental pieces as well. So enjoy the service and the music. And what else, Myra?
Well, thanks, Joanne, for the heads up on the music, which sounds great. The only other thing is a reminder that after the service today, there will be our virtual social hour. So take a moment after the postlude to get your cup of coffee or tea and join us in the Zoom room. The link to that is in the email you got last night or this morning or on the members and friends Facebook page. So on to the announcements, which will be followed by the invocation.
Spring has sprung, and it's time to celebrate at the Fellowship Associates' Spring Gatherings. Reconnect with South Church folks and make new friends at small outdoor gatherings. Guests will wear masks when not eating or drinking and bring their own food and drink and chair and remain socially distant. Events will take place mid-May through June. For dates, times, and locations, check for your Sunday morning email Sign Up Genius link. Don't miss the fun after this very long winter. Sometimes a piece of history is a blank slate. Quarried in Wales and transported as ship ballast for the construction of South Church in 1826, the slates from our roof have seen a lot of history and have great potential for second lives. Charcuterie boards, chalk slates, canvases, house signs, clocks. What will you do with your piece of local history? Available for a donation of $20 or more, slates will be sold on Sundays from 1 to 3 p.m. on the portico. If you have any questions, would like to purchase some slates, or are interested in volunteering, please contact Lori Bilby at turningtide@comcast.net. The Pocket Garden Tour will take place on June 25th and 26th, and we need your help. Volunteers are needed to garden sit and to assist during the tour. No knowledge about gardens is needed, just a willingness to welcome folks with a smile. Volunteer shifts are for 3 hours. The sign-up genius to volunteer can be found in your Sunday morning email. Thank you in advance for your service, and we'll see you in the garden. The South Church Spiritual Book Group is hosting a discussion of Surviving the White Gaze, a memoir by Rebecca Carroll on Wednesday, June 9th at 7 p.m. All are welcome. Please contact southchurchbookgroup@gmail.com for the Zoom link.
When you were born, you cried, and the world rejoiced. Live your life so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. When you were born, you cried, and the world rejoiced. Live your life so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. The world cries and you rejoice. The world cries and you rejoice.
So what's your story? This is the first question a friend asked me when we met. Not where do you live or what kind of work do you do or any number of mundane questions that one can ask a stranger, but what's your story? It was very unexpected. My brain spun. It took several seconds to decide how I was going to answer that question. I was in my 60s. I had a long story. But I knew that this person was not interested in a narrative about my life. So I sorted what was relevant to the time and place. But the incident stayed with me because it was so different. I go to a lot of gatherings, or rather I did before the pandemic, and meet a lot of new people, but I can't remember anyone ever starting a conversation that way before or since. To me, it showed such curiosity. It felt so genuine. We each have a story, but it's not an objective account of the events or externalities of our lives. I am often surprised and amused to hear someone else's story about an experience we shared, or what they took away from a movie we saw or a book that we read. We come to each experience with our own histories and our expectations and our biases, and we interpret things differently. We focus on and remember different things. These are among the reasons that eyewitness accounts are notoriously inaccurate. So I think of my story as a set of books of short stories. There's some thread that holds them together, but one section doesn't necessarily predict what comes next, and there's no particular genre. When I got into my 70s, I started thinking, not that I was in the last chapter of my story, not at all, but rather that I am in the first chapter of what is probably the last volume. And that's a sobering thought. And it leads me to this question. What is the story that will be told about me after I'm gone, when I have no control of the narrative? How will I be remembered? How will my story be interpreted and passed on? Those of us with offspring are ancestors in formation. What story will be told?
Now is the time we light our chalice. And as we watch Reverend Susan light the chalice in our sanctuary, I invite you to light your chalice at home to these words from the Reverend Dr. David Breeden. We tender this flame, opening the book, turning to a page yet to be written, opening a story yet to be told. May we fill this fresh page wisely. May we write a new story into being. May we together inscribe the page with hope. Now please join me in reciting our mission statement, which is displayed on your screen. At South Church, we nurture spiritual growth through worship, learning, and community. We celebrate the worth and dignity of all people, and we inspire one another to act on our faith in the larger community.
Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I did, well, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long as vision lasts, I must answer yes to truth. In my dream and in my dark, always that elusive spark. If they ask what I did, well, tell them I said yes to truth. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they ask what I did best, tell them I said yes to love.
Good morning. I hope you're having a great day so far, and I hope to see you on Saturday at our next South Church Family Outing Day. You can find the details in the main news on our RE webpage. So, our theme this month is story, and I got really interested hearing about an author named David Pink, who created a project where he asks people to create their one-sentence story about themselves. He says it can help people to keep their purpose for their lives in mind, to focus on what they feel is important to them. I like this idea. So at a recent outdoor Sunday RE class, I asked some South Church kids to write each of their one-sentence stories. We wrote our stories as though someone is telling them far into the future when we aren't around. One way to think about it is, what would you want people to say about you many, many years from now? Here's what the kids said.
She was a girl who loved to sing and help others.
Who engineered buildings that looked really cool. She was an artist and loved her friends and family. He liked elaborate art. She was kind, she was brave, she helped her friends in need. He directed Star Wars movies. She loved to make people laugh and smile.
He was a boy who loved learning his ABCs. They turned the tides against the climate crisis.
She flew like a butterfly. She was kind to everyone.
What about all of you watching this right now? What is your one-sentence story? Type it in the chat to share with us. Here's mine. She always made sure you knew how much you are loved. I love you. I love your story, whether you've shared it with me yet or not. And I'll see you soon.
It is now time for the Offertory. For 14 months, we've been in a strange new world. As a community, we have shown an impressive ability to connect, adapt, and move forward. We did not just press the pause button or place a bookmark where we stopped. We continued to write and to live out our story and our congregation's story. So let us now give what we each can to sustain that movement. This month, the collection will be shared with the Joan G. Lovering Health Center. Their passion is to honor, respect, and advocate for the right of everyone to maintain freedom and choices regarding their own sexual and reproductive health. In the words of the Reverend Caleb Parker, may we give in love and in hope. You can do this online via the donate button on our website or send a check in the mail to our office at 73 Court Street, in Portsmouth. The details are on your screen.
Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, we're all gathered here, and those far away, for this time we share, with love and care, we give thanks for this precious day.
I sit here in Leominster and I'm thinking about all of the noises that are around me. The neighbor next door is cutting grass. The turkey who live on the hill behind the house are not happy and they're making funny noises. The wind chimes are picking up because the wind is starting to get a little more breezy. And as you'll hear in the recorded sermon part, my spouse was making lunch with all kinds of clacking and clatterings and fans and cupboards and microwaves. And I wonder if your house feels like that someday. And I think about it and I think about what a strange time we're in. And I think about families who have to share computer space and room space and workspace. And I think about all the people who are working from home, trying to do the best that they can. And I think about our children. And I think about all the ways that we have stayed in touch and not been in touch. And so I offer a prayer to all who struggle with the demands of the day, with the things that need to be done. I offer a prayer for all those who nurture and care for us and feed us. And I offer a prayer for those who are hurt, healing, and need our attention. May we ever continue to be that loving community that we are. This South Church is so important and we need one another. So please take time now to think about what you need, about what your neighbor needs, about what your family members need. And if you are inclined to write something in the chat line. And I will add that my spouse Ron broke his ankle in 3 places. And in a little bit, as this is the world of pre-recordings, we are heading to an orthopedic doctor to see what he needs for care. And I know that you have losses, you have concerns. So I am praying with you, for you, and sending lots of love. Amen. May it be so. her story, his story, my story, the story, your story, a story. All these statements about story are accurate, not just he said, she said, they said, I said, those who wrote it down said, but what is the context? The setting, type, category, the genre. For all these matter in story. So what is the genre of the current story of your life? Is it a mystery, a thriller, a comedy, tragedy, adventure, romance, sci-fi, fairy tale, an historical novel, or horror story? Speaking of horror stories, about 8 years ago, Ron and I were camping across the southern states in Georgia, Florida, and returning to Louisiana. And we went back to a campground outside New Orleans, the Fontainebleau State Park, where we had been before. It was during Mardi Gras, which we enjoy very much during the day, but not so much at night. And we get out of New Orleans before dark and we camp away from the city. This had been a very quiet state park. As it happened, I was reading a novel by Stephen King. I can't think of the name of it, but it was about these evil alien campers who had most expensive and lavish motorhomes, and they were traveling all over the southern states, capturing unsuspecting people to use them for organ donor parts. And I must say, when we pulled into the campground with our pop-up camper, and we're surrounded by these huge rigs where the owners only came out at night, and they all shared a secret handshake, I thought I was living that Stephen King horror story. Therefore, when I think of what genre my or our lives are right now, the context, the environment, the surroundings, and the people who are populating our days and nights sure inform the category and the story we are telling. Do you feel like you can control or shift the story you are in? Are you enjoying the plot and scheme? What would you shift? And do you know how to do that? Well, I believe that Unitarian Universalism is a religion that has the potential to have us transform our story and to be engaged in life in new ways. And I believe even more strongly that South Church is a place to explore your life story in safety, surrounded by love and care, because we really do want to know your story. So much of our story is the personal story of what has been from birth. How many of you are or initially went into careers or made life choices because it was the family expectation? What a ridiculous question we were asked when we were younger. What do you want to be when you grow up? Grown up, I guess. But anyways, ridiculous question. In 1964, I was assigned an essay titled 1984. The assignment: write a story about your life as if you were living it now in 1984 in the career that you will be practicing. And I wrote that I wanted to be a medical technologist, and I was a medical technologist who was trying to treat a family who were sick with an unknown disease that I was supposed to discover and diagnose. I imagined in my essay that they had trichinosis from eating poorly cooked pork. I, of course, saved them, and that was one of my first savior stories. We do live them too, don't we? Well, two things. The closest I ever got to trichinosis was when we raised pigs for food back in the 1960s, but I made sure I cooked the meat till it was completely safe. And as for savior stories, I have come to learn I can offer my experience, my strength, wisdom, if I even have that, and my ultimate attention, but I cannot save anyone. I can only be with someone. I can only be with someone who is suffering. But those family stories linger long and have held more than a few persons to pursue careers that have absolutely no passion for. And if they stood up and said they weren't following the family story,
there was a fair amount of pushback, pain, and alienation. Have you shifted the plot line that was part of your expected family story? It is hard, isn't it? And this reminds me that more often than not, there are many stories going on at the same time. I think of our nation's story. We seem to be caught in a historical novel that has two or more major plot themes. The first is the theme that we are a Christian nation built on Christian values, a nation that will usher in a new Jerusalem and will make citizens fit a certain mold of perfection. And of course, it is a white, Anglo, Eastern European line that speaks a common language and believes and lives out a common storyline, formed as a Christian nation. God save us if this is so. The other theme is one rooted in reality and fact, and it is that we are a nation built upon slavery and the bloods and bodies of African American men, women, and children. And the story began in 1619, even before the Mayflower landed. A ship named the White Lion dropped cargo, settlers, and 20 Negroes who were for sale on the Virginia shore, beginning that long, shameful policy of enslavement of people who were not white. And not only the enslavement, but the dehumanization process, the systemic racism, the laws, the structures that continue to fuel the horror stories so many BIPOC people are living. Environmental degradation is most visible in poor and Black areas, as are the ravages from COVID in communities of color, with the death and destruction that accompanies this virus as it continues to rage, unseen, morphing, killing, and destroying families, affecting businesses where there is a heavy population of BIPOC folk. Continuing the horror story are the deaths at the hands of police who must be held accountable and who must be trained differently, who need to adopt community policing practices and to learn how to offer mental health, addiction recovery, and care services. And new stories need to be told, not by the ones in control and power, but new stories being written and told by those who are oppressed and who can offer stories of transformation from the genre of a tragic story, maybe turning into one that reflects possibility of community unity. Now, that reality story of our nation built upon slavery is told in a book I just read, 400 Souls, by Ibram Kendi and Keisha Blaine. The book is full of stories, painful stories, interesting stories, but they all dispel the myth that we Americans are inclined to tell about our past, as this paragraph reveals from page 81 by the author Kay Wright. The myths Americans tell themselves about the past, that it is distant, that people did bad things out of ignorance rather than malice, and that the good guys won in the end. These stories encourage a false faith in the present. And as the story about our nation goes, so do the stories about our personal lives. Are you living a romance novel with an idealized expectation of another that they will always be the most perfect romantic partner? How's that fantasy going for you? Instead, the reality story is that we must learn and adapt and change and modify. When I meet a couple to plan a marriage, I have two things I advise them on. One, I say to them, life is very upsetting and life is very hard. And there are things going to happen in your life, and I have a suggestion for you. When bad things happen, don't you both get upset at the bad time. One of you needs to be an anchor for the other. Now, you can both take turns and freak out, but if you both lose it at the same time, you'll sink. And secondly, I ask them to tell me how their beloved wins and settles a disagreement. And when they tell me, I say, if you can live with that, you will learn how to make it through the hard times, because the way of settling differences isn't going to change. As a friend of mine remarked about getting old and partnerships, rarely do you or your partner change. You only get more so. And our romance story can be an emotional roller coaster, hot and cold emotions and working out issues with parents and siblings and children and early childhood joys and pains and struggles. And I also remind the couple, as I remind all of us, that there are a lot more than 2 people in a marriage. At a minimum, there are 8. And that brings me to another thought. Remember that in any given day, we can affect up to 1 to 500 people. Think about it. I mean, it's pretty evident that those in our immediate environment are affected by our behavior, but it radiates out at warp speed to and with all we interact with. And just take a simple interaction, let's say like going grocery shopping. We pull into the lot, and before we know it, someone has pulled right into the parking spot we've been eyeing. And we can respond in many ways, but no matter what response, that will affect them, and they in turn affect others. You can be upset and walk into the store still upset with that interaction and be surly and grab a cart, barge down the aisles, blocking the paths and going down the wrong aisles, interfering with the staff who's stocking the vegetable aisle and glaring at them, and they too in affect others they encounter, and on and on and on. And to make things more complicated during this COVID time, we are wearing masks that hide a myriad of facial clues. But we do recognize, and we do know smiling eyes, and we do know scowling eyes. We get to the checkout and either interact or not with the cashier. My mother used to mortify me when I was a grumpy, moody teenager, because she always chatted up the folks in the grocery line, in front of her, behind her, the checker, the bagger. But in hindsight, that was good, caring interaction by my mother, who knew the ripple effect of our story and other stories upon one another. Is your life story one where you sow grumpiness and privilege, arrogance, or do you sow joy, gratitude, and appreciation? And what effect does your story have on others? A lot, I say. However, we can change our life story, and it begins simply by acting differently. It is all part of the mystery. And I would propose that we are living one big mystery story. We think we know where we come from, hydrogen, carbon, cooling enough to spark light and life, and being birthed to families that sometimes only a mystery writer would be able to figure out why they are our family. And then living a life of many genres, fairy tales, adventure stories, historical fiction, thrillers, romantic fantasies, comedy, tragedy. All stories are real, and they are real life dramas, and they are ours. And then we come to the end of life story, where the greatest of mystery awaits. Your story, my story, the story, a story, all unique, all special, all interconnected, all open to interpretation, and from my perspective, best lived out in relationship with others. Share your story. I am waiting to hear it.
When a heart is in a holy place, when a heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of our hearts stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. Then our heart is in a holy place.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Today is the time to live your story with gusto, with enthusiasm and joy and delight. Your story is the wonderfully meaningful way of how you interact with others. Your story affects everyone you come in touch with. And best of all, your story can and is changing even as you tell it, even as you live it, even as you share it. What a wonderful thing being together is, even if virtually. And we are a blend of stories that create a loving, caring community. Go forth now in love, peace, joy. Tell your story, a story. Go in peace. Blessed be.